I hope you got to spend some time outside before the frigid weather comes tomorrow, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Part of your assignment for the project was to go outside. Just be outside. I spent time outside listening to the snow and shivering. This is Walden Pond. You can see in the very far back right-hand corner of Boston. Walden is where Henry David Thoreau challenged himself to spend time in solitude away from the rest of the world. For 2 years, 2 months, 2 days, he lived in a small 10 by 15 cottage, about the size of, I don't know, a large bedroom, a family room maybe. Most of us would be appalled at spending that amount of time in that small of a place. But he did it. This is probably the most famous quote, and it's not even at the very beginning of Walden. Instead, it's about a couple of pages in, buried at the beginning of a paragraph. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. I would suggest that the rest of Walden is a suggestion to us on how to live our lives and what we need to do to be the very best person we can be. Remember, Thoreau was a good friend of Emerson's, and in fact, this is Emerson's land on Walden Pond that he has given to Thoreau. I hope you'll take some time to read the excerpt that I have in our book about Walden. The book itself is actually divided into 11 chapters. Economy, where I lived and what I lived for, which is where the quote, I went to the woods deliberately, comes from. Reading, sounds, solitude, visitors, the bean field, the village, the ponds, Baker Farm, and higher laws. Each chapter has a focus. In economy, he talks about how he only needs 4 essential things for living: food, shelter, clothing, and fuel. And what's interesting is that in the year 1863, one of the years that he lives and in the cabin on Walden, he only spends a total of $28.12.5. Okay, I think that's totally cool. They had half cents, and we're talking about getting rid of the penny today. That is the equivalent of $863 today. Now, bear in mind that when he's living there in Walden, he doesn't have much food, and Mrs. Emerson, Mrs. Hawthorne, and his own mother, they all bring him food on almost a daily basis. And then he talks about reading, talks about how important he thinks classic literature is. With sounds, he says, forever be on the alert. Solitude, he says, it's easy to be lonely even when around companions, if your heart isn't open to them, which is actually a great lesson for living. Visitors, although he was taking an exercise in solitude, he loved to have visitors. He always had 3 chairs ready, waiting to be filled by a friend coming to visit. In addition to Walden, he writes several other essays. The most important for us today is civil disobedience. He writes this in support of the abolitionist movement, and it emphasizes his faith in the individual consciousness. Now, remember, again, please, he's a friend of Emerson's, and we've already read Emerson's essay, Self-Reliance, where Emerson encourages us to trust thyself. Trust thyself. So, with civil disobedience, he is saying, do not let government supersede the individual consciousness. Additionally, he thinks it's an expression of the individual's liberty to create change. The whole essay doesn't tell us to wait passively, but it does encourage passive resistance. And please know, there is a huge difference in that. Thoreau was not a revolutionary. He only spent 1 night in jail for refusing to pay his taxes. And it was in direct protest to American slavery and to the Mexican War, both of which he vehemently thought was wrong. And really, especially slavery, I would say that's the vehicle for an awful lot of the transcendental writings. But the idea of passive resistance, civil disobedience, has a worldwide following, and that has only increased, I would suggest, in the decades and even centuries since he wrote it. Gandhi used the philosophies presented in Thoreau's Civil Disobedience to free his country from oppression. Here in the United States, Martin Luther King embraced civil disobedience when he helped lead the charge for civil rights in the 1960s. And I thought it was ironic when Thursday during our snowstorm I was preparing to talk with you a little bit about civil disobedience, and I heard the news that Nelson Mandela had died at the age of 95 in South Africa. And you're honestly probably too young to have followed Mandela too much, but I remember the importance of his movement with the ANC in South Africa and what, through passive resistance, he was able to do to liberate a whole people, and I would suggest create harmony in a very large country. And so I show you this last slide, not to encourage you to go out there and be passively resistant, but somewhere out there, somebody is going to pick up the mantle of Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela. Someone else is going to use the teachings of Henry David Thoreau's Civil Disobedience, and they're going to change the world. And it could be you.